What's up, everybody? It's your favorite, checking it twice, favorite nerd, and today we are looking at another list. These are the top 5 worst 5 figures that I purchased, meaning across the board, any franchise, third party, official, Turtles, Star Wars, Marvel, DC, whatever. These are my list for my purchases of the year, excluding statues, because statues may have taken all top 5 top spots this year, and not even the big boys like that Iron Studio stuff. I love it. So anyway, let's get into it with number 5 on my most disappointing figure of the year list. Once again, this doesn't mean that necessarily the figure is bad. It just means that I had an expectation and I was disappointed with the product that I received. And we're going to start with Mafex Jean Grey. Another Mafex figure is going to pop up in this list at some point. On the positive side of things, this is pretty much the exact inverse. Between the hair and the kind of stiffness, it's like the character's locked behind some sort of metallic blue painted cage. It's really hard to get her in any sort of pose that doesn't seem like it's sculpted out of concrete as opposed to a natural, fluid-looking pose. And Mafex has been knocking that stuff out of the park recently, so when I got this, I was like, of course this is the one that I bought, but it didn't change the fact that I was extremely disappointed. Number 4 is the Fans Toys tapes, but to be fair, it's just these two. And the reason why? Lack of articulation, even more lack of articulation than I'm used to with Fans Toys, so I'm disappointed there. But most importantly, I've never had a Fans Toys figure so poorly built. Build is one of the things that I always kind of adore about their products, and they let me down. How could I not be disappointed? Number 3 is Tomax and Zaymon. You can pick your poison, and I can't really say anything better than what I said in the first video, but the truth is like what I like about the classified line is they stay true to the original designs, but they update them where they don't seem as goofy. This one they didn't do it. I understand that it's more difficult, but my real issue here is not that. My real issue is this gray plastic that they use to emulate silver. It doesn't work at all, and it cheapens the figure. And the whole year, G.I. Joe Classified to me has been taking, you know, relatively cheap figures and putting in the extra effort, putting in the extra love to make them look like anything but cheap figures. And this is the exact opposite. This is a figure that looks cheaper than it should because they didn't put forth the extra love. So, once again, it's not bad. I'm just disappointed. Coming in at number 2, Super 7 Robin Hood. Once again, I kind of harped on it before, but I love this character. I love this movie. It means a lot to me. Super 7 has limitations that I'm very much aware of, but I still expect their figures to be able to stand up and be fairly well balanced, which he struggles with. I expect for the head not to just pop off, which mine does all the time. I expect for him to hold his accessories, which mine doesn't. You know, like, just extremely... Look, I'll be honest with you. I got this guy off my shelf to do this video and then the non-Transformers list video, right? During that time, his head has popped off 30 times. He's dropped his arrow, as you can see. He's not even holding it now because I got so frustrated with it. I just got rid of it. I took it out of play. It's just a very frustrating figure. And it's a bummer because I very much like the sculpt and paint here as well as the character itself. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't get much more disappointing than this for me. It just gets a little bit more disappointing, which we're going to get to here in a second. And there's numero uno. And look, I know this is going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, but you know what rubbed me the wrong way? That paint rubbing off. See, here's the thing, is like, I have certain expectations of Fans Toys. I expect that the sculpt is going to be there. They did that. I expect that the paint is going to be there. They did that, but I've never had it fail like this. I expect that it's going to be well built. I'm not sure I can say that about this one in the same way. Joints too tight that it pulls the transformation apart, like just stuff like that I'm not necessarily used to. The one thing I can give it is it exceeded my expectations in articulation. However, the real reason why this makes my list for disappointment is because this year Fans Toys has exceeded my expectations with their transformations. I haven't had one frustrating Fans Toys transformation all year. And then there was this. And as a result, it is without a doubt the most disappointing figure to me. Not only is it aesthetically ruined from its inability to apply paint in any sort of meaningful way, but it let go of the one ground that they had kind of gained all year. Just disappointing. I don't hate it, and I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. And there they are. Top 5 most disappointing figures of the year. And to be fair, I mean, look, we've seen a lot worse, right? So for these to be the disappointments, maybe that speaks to something as far as where we are quality-wise these days. But nonetheless, I was disappointed. Let's move on. And now we'll move on to the surprisingly good category. Once again, this category means figures that I bought with a certain expectation. It doesn't need to be necessarily a low one. It could be a high one, but the figure exceeded my expectations. And that's kind of the case here. I reviewed all of the Combaticons. I thought they were fair to average to below average for the most part. In fact, I'd put the Streetwise in that same category. But this one had a little bit of flavor to it. This one had something that stuck with me, that I remembered, that I found myself going back to look at and pick up over and over and over again. And the reason why it's surprisingly good is because I've looked at all the others and I've never felt that way about the others. This one became special to me in some way. Can't explain why. I think it's something to do with the deco, and I think it's something to do with the articulation. But whatever the reason, it was surprisingly good. Number 4, once again, this figure isn't phenomenal. It's far from it. It's very, very basic. But that's kind of what I expect with NECA, right? However, given that I know that, the fact that the basic articulation drove the character here home, and I said this before, but the fact that it did, I can't help but notice, and I can't help but give credit to, like, there's something about the face sculpt, there's something about the paint, there's something about the limited articulation that works to the stiffness of the character. Like, it's just one of those that stuck out to me, man, and I don't know why. But it's low on the list, but it's on the list. Number 3 is going to be Zeta Toys or Moon Studios Raiden or Radiatron, whatever they called him. And here's the thing. I don't think this figure's perfect. I think it has some issues. I'm using stock footage here because I'm not going to get mine off the shelf because I know I'm going to have to fight with some of the guns that are tabbed into certain places, and certain things might come untabbed here and there, and it's just not worth it to me. But that being said, I was worried that this might be a disaster because they 86'd the parts for me. No pun intended on the 86. And it wasn't as solid, in my opinion, as their previous offerings under the Zeta flag, but it was nowhere near a mess. It was nowhere near floppy. It was nowhere near unbalanced. It was surprisingly well balanced, surprisingly stable for how they did it. And for that, it earns a spot on the list. My number 2 has to go to Hasbro Motormaster. Why? Well, because for one, my standard for Hasbro Transformers isn't the highest to begin with, but for 2, I clearly remember the last Hasbro Motormaster I bought, and it was a capital N, capital I, capital G, capital H, capital T, capital M, capital A, capital R, capital E, Nightmare. Doofy, Doofy, Doofy. Huey, Doofy, and Louie. The Doof Troop. It was awful. So to go down that road again, believe what I say when I tell you when I was a bit skeptical. But my skepticisms were easily subdued when a pretty decent figure landed in my lap. Now, it ended up costing $50 more than the previous one, right? But you get what you pay for. Do I think I got an $80 toy here? Not at all. But in spite of that, I was still surprised at how well it was done. So what's fair is fair. You know, look, this year has been a rough year for Black Series, and last year wasn't too much better. So to not give this figure the credit for being the most surprisingly good to me would be a lie, because my expectations were that it was going to be more of the same. Even when I'm excited for the character, right? Like Aya Sakura, I was excited for her, and she was disappointing even though I was excited for the character. So I was worried that this might be more of the same, and it wasn't. They knocked this one out of the park, and I couldn't be happier, but I also couldn't be more surprised. Pleasantly surprised, but surprised. And there they are. The most surprisingly good figures of the year, bar Raiden, just because it's just not worth getting down. It's just too much of a pain to get down. Probably wouldn't have been as much of a pain had it been parts forming, but be that as it may, it's still surprisingly good. And you know, nothing's better than spending money on something, expecting a certain level and receiving it and having it only exceed your expectations. So we got some Hasbro in here, some NECA, and some third party. Love to see it. And we'll move on to worst figures of the year. And trust me, believe what I say when I tell you, never has it pained me so much as with this one. This character deserves so much more. Miss Carrie Fisher deserves so much more. And we as fans and consumers deserve so much more. I said it before, I'll say it again. The skirt should have been a soft goods, and something needed to be done about the ankle tension because she can barely stand. In my display, I have her leaning up against Solo. Here, I'm using a stand because otherwise she'd be left to her own devices. And let me show you real quick what those devices are. Now, I've done this in an effort to prove a point. If I stand her up and she stands straight, which is what normally happens to me, it's not my fault. Much like Solo. Oh, for sake. Number 4, worst figure of the year. And it really, to be honest, it's not so much about this figure. It's about what this figure represents, which is a problem across the line. It's a problem across the legacy line. Not to say that every figure suffers from it, but many do. I hate these proportions so much. I've been very vocal about it. People didn't understand what I meant. I was able to prove it when I did the Wild Rider review. I didn't get as many apologies as I should have, but it's okay. I plan on living a few more years. I'll keep the comments section on. But for my money, having bought a few mainline Transformers this year, first time in some time, for my money, I could have spent it somewhere else. This is an ugly release. It's one of the main reasons why I'm going with a combined mode display piece from their Minosaur, is because of how atrocious this bot is. Third worst figure of the year, Star Wars Black Series Black Cranston. You know what the only thing worse than a poorly sculpted, weirdly painted, oddly decoed plastic color choice, specifically for the armor, mind you, limited articulation, reuse of a mold figure is? Make it more expensive, which is what they did here. They charged you more and you got less. A new head sculpt and that little cheesy vest thing that he's got on. Just unacceptable. Really a poor offering. But not a poor price, mind you. God forbid. Number 2, Book of Boba Fett. Hasbro has really set a bar with me with their Black Series. The fact that they continue to fall short of it in recent years is really depressing for me. I'm not sure we've seen a great wave of Black Series since the first Mandalorian wave. I'd have to go back and do my research on that. That being said, the knees on this thing. I mean, like, I'll never get over it. Like, all right, so there's the knee standing straight, right? Come on, man. That's the ugliest knee in toy history, I think. Just unacceptable. Like, you can't do anything with this other than stand him straight up. I guess they got it right, though, because you couldn't do a whole lot with that show either. But be that as it may, yeah, number 2. Number 1, Tigra, showing his ugly face once again, and I do mean ugly face, mainly because of the way they decided to do the eyes, but there is something to be said here about Super 7 needing to update the way that they do business. It's not 2005 anymore. Hasbro has surpassed you. Mythic Legions, who use the same format, give or take, have surpassed you. McFarlane Toys has surpassed you, and all of them are cheaper than your figures, price-wise. You do the math, because I'm tired of doing it. Super 7 needs to rethink the way they do business. They've got some really great ideas, and they've got some really good sculptors. They just need to make better figures or lower their price. I'm good with either. And there they are, just a ragtag bunch. And look, I don't want to give any spoilers away, but just take note, out of the 5 worst figures that I bought all year, in my opinion, 4 of them are Hasbro releases. 3 of them are Star Wars releases. It's too random to be random. But just pay attention to that. It's gonna become something to think about here shortly as we move into the next segment. But yeah, not the best money I've ever spent right here. Moving on to best figures of the year, once again, that I purchased myself across all brands and spectrums. And coming in at number 5 is Mafex Harley Quinn. This is the second time that I've noticed Mafex do this, where they take a character without a whole lot of flash and pizzazz, they give it the appropriate accessories, they sculpt it and paint it to a point, and then add in the articulation to a level that gives almost full range of motion, and there's something about all of those components coming together where the character just bleeds through. I've seen them doing with her, and then with Catwoman last year, and I think Catwoman made the list last year, and she makes the list this year, and pretty much for the same exact reasons. Just a phenomenal effort. Number 4, Serpentor. Once again, a bit of a rehash, right? But the level of sculpt work, I mean, even the cape is sculpted lowercase s, but you know what I mean. Once again, the amount of thought and detail that went into every little nook and cranny to sort of make it a memorable piece. I know there's issues regarding the distribution of it. I've kind of talked about that in different places, so I'm not going to waste too much time with it here. But that was standing. Once again, sculpt, paint, articulation, accessories, like that head sculpt thing that they did where you could have the head like kind of look perfect but be locked in position, or swap out the kind of Cobra crown and have it be mobile. Just very, very thoughtful stuff that a lot of other companies don't consider, even at a ridiculously higher price point. Number 3, Fans Toys Rig, and spoilers, the only figure to make it into my top 5 that is a Transformer this year. And I have some issues with the shoulders aesthetically, subjectively, but I can't deny that this thing pretty much does what Fans Toys should be doing, with a few exceptions. I don't think they should follow the Toon model so closely, and I think they should cook in more articulation. But this does match or represent a time where Fans Toys kind of got everything right in terms of engineering for me. Something that we saw them follow through with for most of the year until the fourth quarter, the last minute of the fourth quarter, mind you. But still, I mean, there's an awful lot about this figure that is Fans Toys doing what Fans Toys does when Fans Toys does it right. Fun as well, which isn't always the case with this company either, but this figure was pretty fun. My number 2 figure of the year, G.I. Joe Classified Spirit. To this day, I think this is probably the best mainline release that Hasbro has ever done. They did what I like best, which is take an old design, stay true to it, but give it a modern feel. They give you beyond basic articulation. They paint everything that's appropriate to paint. They tie in all of the accessories and make them thoughtful. They nail the face sculpt and paint it right. Sounds easy, but it's not for Hasbro, as we all know, but this is an example of them doing it, and doing it to an insane degree. And number 1, I don't really think it should come to anybody as any real surprise. It's the HasLab Galactus. Like I said before, it just took everything that was right about the Sentinel and it carried it forward, and it took everything that was a critique or a criticism of the Sentinel and fixed it. There's some issues with this in a different sense as to, you know, how big can a figure get before it ceases to be fun, but that withstanding, I can't deny the level of quality of this thing. It's something to take note of. And there they are, the top 5 figures of the year for me, purchases-wise. Figures that I added to my personal collection. And look, I know I've said it once, and I hate to say it, but you're going to have to hear me say it one more time. What's amazing about this is not a flex, but I buy a fair amount of toys a year. And the fact that 3 of them are Hasbro figures, and of those 3, to be fair, 2 are exclusive in a way, but nonetheless, it is impressive that 3 of these 5 are Hasbro offerings. Like, Fans Toys usually makes the cut. Mafex I don't think does either, but some sort of import figure usually makes the cut. The fact that 3 are domestic Hasbro figures is really, I mean, something to take note of, I guess. Let's take a look at them all. And there they are, minus the Raiden, kind of my figures of the year, for, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. Or maybe not a whole lot of indifference, but certainly good and bad. And look, things are going to change on the channel soon. It's been 9 years of doing this, and it's been taxing in a number of ways. It's been rewarding in a number of ways as well, don't get me wrong. But things are going to start slowing down a little bit on my end. I'm not going to be disappearing entirely. Therell still be plenty of stuff to watch throughout the month, but I need to really start putting energy into things that I'm going to get energy out of, or at least good energy out of, and as a result I'm going to be changing the way that I do business. So there's going to be some stuff that you guys used to see, that you love to see, that you won't see anymore unless you join me on my next journey, which is Patreon. That's where most of my efforts are going. But one thing's for sure, 2 things for certain. I've always appreciated you guys, you know, the ones that give the support, the ones that like, the ones that share, the ones that help spread word of mouth, the ones that defend me on the board, whatever the case may be. I do appreciate you guys. The ones that watch and never get involved in any of the bull, I do appreciate you guys. It's just time for me to stop the rat race of this stuff and focus on a few other different things, and a few things that I'm maybe a bit more passionate about, and do it in a place where I have a lot more freedom to do it. But I do appreciate you, and I will be back, just not in the same capacity that I was this year in the previous 9 years. Happy New Year to all of you. I wish you nothing but the best. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.